The alien princess looked to the stars, but a human's heart changed her path asterisk when stars collide. With Earth, David Martinez had spent 3 years manning the remote observation station in the Atacama Desert. The isolation suited him perfectly. After losing his family in the war, he found peace in the endless silence and the dancing lights above. Tonight felt different, though. The stars seemed restless, pulsing with an energy he had never witnessed before. The first sign came as a whisper across his radio equipment, strange frequencies that made his instruments hum with confusion. David adjusted the receivers, thinking it was interference from a passing satellite. But the signals grew stronger, more organized, almost like a language trying to break through the cosmic noise. Then the sky erupted in silver fire. A massive object tore through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of burning gases that illuminated the desert like daylight. It wasn't a meteor or space debris. This thing moved with purpose, changing direction as it fell, fighting against gravity with desperate energy. David watched through his telescope as the craft struggled to maintain control, its hull glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet. Equipment rattled on the shelves as seismic waves rippled outward. From the crash site, without hesitation, David grabbed his emergency kit and headed toward the smoke rising from beyond the nearest ridge. His years of military training kicked in, overriding his scientific caution. The crash site was a crater of melted sand and twisted metal. In the center lay a ship, unlike anything human technology could produce. Its surface seemed to shift between solid and liquid, healing itself even as he watched. Steam rose from cooling metal, and the air tasted of ozone and something else, something sweet and unfamiliar. Movement caught his eye. A figure stumbled from the wreckage, tall and graceful despite obvious injuries. David's breath caught in his throat. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight captured in living flesh. Long hair cascaded down her back in shades of deep purple and silver, moving as if underwater even in the still desert air. Her clothing appeared to be made of the same adaptive material as her ship, form-fitting and responsive to her movements. But it was her eyes that stopped David's heart. They were vast and deep, holding the darkness of space itself, with tiny points of light that moved like distant stars. She collapsed before he could reach her. David found himself cradling an unconscious alien princess, her body surprisingly warm against the cool desert night. There was something regal about her features, an aristocratic bearing that spoke of noble birth and careful breeding. A thin band of what looked like crystallized starlight circled her forehead, clearly some kind of crown or rank insignia. The language of touch. For 3 days, she remained unconscious. David moved her to his station, setting up a makeshift medical bay in his living quarters. Her wounds seemed to heal at an accelerated rate, but she showed no signs of waking. He monitored her vital signs as best he could, noting how her heartbeat followed a rhythm unlike anything terrestrial. When she finally opened her eyes, the fear in them nearly broke his heart. She pressed herself against the wall, speaking rapidly, in a musical language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. David raised his hands slowly, showing empty palms, and spoke in the softest voice he could manage. "It's okay. You're safe. I won't hurt you." She studied his face for long moments, those star-filled eyes searching for deception. Gradually, her terror faded into cautious curiosity. She pointed to herself and spoke a single word that sounded like Zara. David repeated it, earning what might have been a smile. Over the following days, they developed a basic communication system using gestures, drawings, and simple words. Zara proved to be a quick learner, absorbing English with remarkable speed. She was clearly intelligent, often frustrated by the limitations of their crude communication methods. Through broken sentences and careful pantomime, David learned fragments of her story, She was royalty of some kind, fleeing from something or someone in the stars above. Her ship had been damaged in what seemed to be a battle, forcing her emergency landing on Earth. But the most important thing David learned was simpler and more profound. Despite coming from the vast darkness between worlds, Zara laughed at his clumsy attempts to cook alien-friendly meals. She marveled at simple things like running water and electric lights. And when she looked at him, her expression held something he recognized, despite the impossibility of it all. Hope. The art of understanding 2 weeks passed in careful exploration of each other's worlds. Zara's English improved rapidly, her musical accent turning even simple words into poetry. She explained that her people, the Kailani, possessed enhanced learning capabilities, especially when motivated by survival. But David suspected her quick progress came from genuine curiosity about human culture rather than mere necessity. "Your species is strange," she told him one evening as they watched. "The sunset paint the desert in brilliant oranges and reds. You fight each other constantly, yet you saved me without question. You could have contacted your authorities, claimed rewards or recognition. Instead, you protected a stranger." David considered this. Maybe that's what makes us human. We're contradictory. We can be cruel and kind in the same breath. But when it matters, most of us choose to help. Zara touched the healing crystal embedded in her crown, its light dimming as her energy reserves depleted. "Among my people, such decisions are calculated. We weigh benefit against cost, analyze potential outcomes. Spontaneous kindness is considered a weakness." "Is that why you're here? Did someone consider your kindness a weakness?" Her expression darkened. "I refused an arranged marriage to a warlord from the Nexus Empire. My refusal was seen as rebellion against the greater good. The Union would have brought military protection to my world, but at the cost of enslaving our people to his war machine." David felt anger rise in his chest. "So they exiled you?" "Worse, they sent me to be his bride anyway, against my will. I escaped during the transfer, stealing a scout ship and fleeing to the outer systems. His forces have been hunting me for months." The weight of her revelation settled between them. David realized he wasn't just harboring a refugee. He was protecting someone whose capture could spark interstellar conflicts. Yet looking at her face, seeing the mixture of determination and vulnerability in her star-bright eyes, he knew he would make the same choice again. Lessons in humanity. Zara's fascination with human customs provided unexpected moments of joy amid the tension. She insisted on learning to cook, though her first attempts at scrambled eggs resulted in something resembling yellow rubber. Her laughter at the failure was infectious, filling the small station with music David hadn't realized he'd been missing. She was particularly intrigued by human art and music. David's collection of books and recordings became her window into the complexity of human emotion. She spent hours studying photographs, asking endless questions about the expressions in body language of the subjects. "This one," she said, pointing to a picture of children playing in a park. "Their faces show pure happiness. No calculation, no hidden agenda. How do humans maintain such innocence while understanding the darkness of your world?" "We don't always," David admitted. "But maybe that's the point. We choose to hope despite evidence that hope might be foolish. We love knowing we might be hurt. We trust knowing we might be betrayed." Zara traced the faces in the photograph with one delicate finger. "My betrothed Vorthik would see such emotions as tools to be exploited. He builds his empire on fear and control, believing that power through force is the only reliable foundation." "What do you believe?" She looked at David with those impossible eyes. "I'm beginning to think power through connection might be stronger. When you saved me, you gained nothing material. Yet I would do anything to protect you now. Vorthik commands. Loyalty through threat. You inspired it through kindness. Their conversations often stretched late into the night, Zara sharing stories of distant worlds while David described the simple beauty of earthly existence. She told him about cities that floated in gas-giant atmospheres, about creatures that sang songs across light years of space, about technologies that could reshape matter at the molecular level. In return, David showed her the wonder in everyday things, the way morning dew caught sunlight like tiny diamonds, how wind could carve rock into impossible sculptures over millennia, the persistence of life in the harshest environments. Growing connections 1 month after her arrival, Zara made a confession that changed everything between them. They were sitting outside the station, watching meteor showers paint streaks across the star-filled sky when she turned to him with unusual seriousness. "David, there's something you must know. My people live much longer than humans. What you call a lifetime, we consider a brief season. I am young by Kalani standards, but I have already lived longer than most humans ever will." David felt his heart skip. "How long?" "I have seen 200 of your years pass." The number hit him like a physical blow. He had been falling in love with someone who viewed his entire species as brief candles flickering in cosmic wind. Yet as he looked at her face, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, he realized the revelation changed nothing fundamental about his feelings. "Does that frighten you?" she asked quietly. "It should," he said honestly. "But it doesn't. Whatever time we have, however brief it might be from your perspective, I want to spend it with you." Zara's smile could have powered the station for a week. "I was afraid you would see me as too different, too alien." "You are different, David." "Agreed. But you're also the most human person I've ever met, if that makes sense. You feel deeply, love freely, hope against odds. Those aren't alien traits. They're the best of what any species can be." That night, for the first time since her arrival, Zara didn't watch the stars with longing. Instead, she fell asleep beside David, her hand in his, anchored to Earth by something stronger than gravity. Neither of them noticed the small ship that passed silently overhead, its sensors recording their location before disappearing back into the darkness between worlds. Shadows from the stars. The warning came through Zara's damaged ship systems 3 days later. Emergency alerts flashed across screens that had been dark since her crash, powered by some backup system David hadn't known existed. Zara's face went pale as she read the scrolling text in her native language. "They've found me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the humming electronics. "Vortex tracking ships entered your solar system 6 hours ago." David felt ice form in his stomach. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 2 days before they reach Earth. My ship's emergency beacon activated when the main systems failed. I thought I had disabled it, but Vortex technology is more advanced than I realized." The next hours passed in frantic preparation. Zara worked to repair what she could of her ship's systems, while David gathered supplies and equipment. They both knew the scout vessel was too damaged for space travel, but perhaps its defensive systems could be restored. "There's another way," Zara said as they worked side by side in the cramped ship interior. "I could surrender myself to Vorthik. He wants me alive, so he won't harm Earth if I comply." "Absolutely not." David's response was immediate and firm. "We'll find another solution." "David, you don't understand what you're asking. Vorthik commands a battle fleet. Earth's technology is centuries behind ours. He could devastate your world as easily as stepping on an insect. Then we don't let him get that chance." Zara stopped working and stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" David had been thinking about this possibility since learning of her past. "You said your people value strength and power. What if we showed them something stronger than fear?" "I don't follow." "We show them humanity. Not our weapons or our technology, but what makes us human. Our capacity for sacrifice, for standing together against impossible odds." The human response David's first call went to his former commanding officer, General Harrison. Explaining the situation required careful diplomacy and no small amount of faith that his old friend would trust him despite the incredible nature of his claims. Zara's willingness to demonstrate her abilities, including limited telepathic contact, helped convince the skeptical military leadership. Within hours, the desert station became the center of a carefully orchestrated response. Scientists, diplomats, and military strategists arrived by helicopter and transport plane. But David had insisted on specific conditions. This would not be a military operation. Instead, it would be a demonstration of humanity's greatest strength. Our ability to choose compassion over conflict. Dr. Elizabeth Winters, the lead xenobiologist, interviewed Zara extensively about Kelani culture and Vorthic's likely approaches. He rules through intimidation, Zara explained. He expects either submission or violence. A third option might confuse him long enough for us to establish dialogue. What kind of third option? General Harrison asked. David answered, "We welcome him, not with weapons or surrender, but as a guest. We show him what Earth has to offer, what humanity represents." The room fell silent. Finally, Dr. Winters spoke. "It's either brilliant or suicidal." "Maybe both," David admitted, "but it's authentically human." The Aravalvathax fleet appeared in Earth's skies with terrifying majesty. 3 massive ships, each the size of a city, took positions around the planet. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and energy patterns danced across their surfaces like captured lightning. The lead ship dispatched a single shuttle toward the coordinates provided by Earth's hastily assembled diplomatic team. David and Zara waited in the desert landing zone, surrounded by representatives from every major nation on Earth. But they carried no weapons or no armor. Instead, they brought gifts: art, music, literature, and examples of human achievement. Vorthic emerged from his shuttle like a walking nightmare. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, his body was encased in armor that seemed to be fused with his flesh. His face was hidden behind a mask that projected tactical information directly onto its surface, giving him an inhuman appearance that spoke of countless cybernetic modifications. Behind him came an honor guard of similarly enhanced warriors, their movements perfectly synchronized like parts of a single machine. These were beings who had traded their individuality for collective strength, their emotions for tactical efficiency. "Princess Zara," Vorthic's voice boomed from speakers built into his armor, the sound carrying across the desert like thunder. "You have led us quite a chase. I trust these primitives have treated you well during your captivity." Zara stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance. "I am not a captive, Vorthic. I am a guest among friends." The warlord's masked head turned toward David and the assembled humans. "Friends? These creatures are barely above animals. They fight each other over resources, destroy their own environment, live brief lives filled with pointless suffering. What could you possibly find valuable in such a species?" David felt every eye turned toward him. This was the moment that would determine not just Zara's fate, but potentially the future of human-alien relations. He stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "You're right about us," he said, surprising everyone, including himself. "We do fight. We do make mistakes. We live short lives and often waste the time we have. But we also do something else. We choose to hope anyway. We choose to love despite the risk of loss. We choose to help strangers even when it costs us everything." Vorthic tilted his head, his mask's displays flickering. "Explain. When Zara crashed here, I didn't know who she was or where she came from. I could have contacted my government, sold information about her technology, used her presence for personal gain. Instead, I helped her because she needed help. That's what humans do. We see suffering and we try to stop it. They challenged the warlord laughed, a sound like grinding. Metal, sentiment, weakness disguised as virtue. You speak of choice, but choice without power is meaningless. Observe. Vorthik gestured, and one of his ships fired a controlled energy burst into the empty desert. Sand fused into glass, creating a crater 100 meters wide. The demonstration of power was unmistakable. I could level your cities in minutes. He continued. Your species would have no choice but to submit. This is reality. This is power. And yet, David said quietly, Zara chose to flee from that power rather than submit to it. She chose an uncertain future over a guaranteed but empty life. That choice led her here, to people willing to protect her even against impossible odds. Which is stronger? Your ability to destroy, or our willingness to sacrifice for someone we care about? Zara moved to stand beside David, taking his hand. The gesture was simple but profound, representing everything Vorthik's philosophy rejected. Around them, the human delegation stood firm despite the overwhelming threat overhead. For long moments, silence stretched across the desert. Then Vorthik spoke again, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been curiosity. Very well, humans. You claim your way is stronger than mine. Prove it. I challenge your species to demonstrate this power you speak of. Show me something worth more than the ability to conquer and control. David squeezed Zara's hand and stepped into humanity's greatest gamble. Humanity's answer, David, looked across the assembled crowd of humans, each face reflecting a mixture of terror and determination. Representatives from every continent stood together despite their differences, united by something more powerful than fear. This was humanity's moment to prove that cooperation could triumph over conquest. What did you have in mind? David asked Vorthik. The warlord's masked displays shifted, processing data streams from his fleet. My forces will remain in orbit for 7 of your days. During this time, you will demonstrate your species' supposedly superior approach to leadership and social organization. I will observe how you handle crisis, conflict, and the pressure of imminent destruction. And if we pass your test, Princess Zara may remain on your world, free from pursuit. I will even consider establishing peaceful trade relationships with your species. Zara gasped. Vorthik, you cannot mean this. The Nexus Council will never approve such arrangements. The warlord turned his attention to her. The Council values results above tradition. If these humans prove their methods are more effective than ours, it would be inefficient to ignore such potential. However, his voice took on a threatening tone. If they fail, I will take you back to fulfill your obligations, and their world will serve as an example to other species who might harbor fugitives from Nexus justice. Dr. Winters stepped forward. What specific challenges will you present? I will not create artificial tests. Instead, I will observe how your species responds to the knowledge that 3 battle cruisers hover above their home. How long before your governments turn on each? Other? How soon before panic destroys your social order? How quickly will you abandon your principles when survival is at stake? 7 days to prove humanity. The first day brought chaos, as expected. News of the alien fleet's presence couldn't be hidden from global populations. Panic buying emptied stores in major cities. Stock markets crashed worldwide. Several smaller nations declared martial law while others saw religious riots, as various groups proclaimed the arrival as either salvation or apocalypse. But something unexpected happened alongside the predictable chaos. Relief organizations mobilized. Without government orders, communities organized neighborhood watch groups to prevent looting. Scientists from competing nations began sharing data freely, working together to understand the alien technology and find peaceful solutions. David and Zara worked tirelessly with the international team, coordinating responses, and maintaining communication with Vorthic's fleet. The warlord's representatives monitored everything through advanced surveillance systems, their reports transmitted directly to their commanders' analytical databases. "Your cities burn with fear," Vorthic observed during their evening briefing. "Your leaders argue while your people suffer. This is the superior system you champion?" "Watch longer," David replied calmly. "Humans don't show their best qualities immediately. We need time to overcome our initial reactions and remember who we can be." Rising above fear by the third day, the global response began to shift. International relief efforts, coordinated through improvised networks, proved more effective than traditional governmental channels. Humanitarian organizations that had been rivals for decades merged resources to provide aid where needed most. Religious leaders from different faiths held joint ceremonies, calling for peace and understanding rather than fear. Scientists published open-source research on potential defensive technologies, freely sharing innovations that could have made individual nations wealthy. Most remarkably, ordinary citizens began demonstrating the human capacity for extraordinary kindness. In Tokyo, elderly residents opened their homes to families fleeing rural areas. In Sao Paulo, street vendors distributed free food to anyone who needed it. In London, rival soccer fans worked together to maintain order and protect vulnerable populations. Zara watched these developments with growing amazement. "David, this is unprecedented. During times of crisis, most species either fragment into competing factions or submit to authoritarian control. Your people are doing neither. We're doing what humans do best," David explained. "We're muddling through together, making mistakes but learning from them, helping each other despite our differences." The unexpected alliance on the fifth day. Something occurred that surprised even David's optimistic expectations. A coalition of Earth's major powers formally proposed, creating a unified response to potential future alien contact. Rather than competing for technological advantages or territorial gains, they agreed to share any benefits equally among all nations. The proposal wasn't perfect. Several countries initially refused to participate, and negotiations were heated. But within 48 hours, even the holdouts joined the coalition, recognizing that humanity's survival might depend on presenting a united front to the galaxy. Vorthic's analysis. Reports began showing confused readings. His tactical systems had been designed to predict species behavior based on historical patterns of conquest and submission. But humanity's response fell outside all known parameters. "Your people's actions are inefficient," he told David during their daily communication. "Sharing technology weakens individual competitive advantages. Assisting rival nations reduces relative power positions. Providing aid without guarantee of return violates basic resource management principles." "Maybe efficiency isn't the highest value," David suggested. "Maybe connection is more important than competition." That evening, Zara made a request that changed everything. "I want to address Vorthic's fleet directly, not as a princess or a fugitive, but as someone who has experienced both ways of life." Zara's choice, the transmission went out simultaneously to Vorthic's 3 ships and every communication network on Earth. Zara stood before the cameras, her natural luminescence casting a gentle glow as she spoke in both English and her native Kelani language. "My name is Zara of the Kelani, and I am speaking to you from Earth, the world that has become my home. I came here as a refugee, fleeing an arranged marriage to a warlord who rules through fear and force. I expected to find a primitive species concerned only with survival and territorial disputes." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Instead, I found something I had never experienced in all my years among the stars. I found beings who chose to help without expectation of reward, who sacrificed their own safety to protect a stranger, who faced impossible odds with courage rather than Submission. The transmission reached not just Vorthic's fleet, but, through quantum communication networks, hundreds of worlds across the Nexus Empire. Billions of beings who had lived under authoritarian rule heard a princess describe an alternative way of existence. Humans are not perfect, Zara continued. They argue, they make mistakes, they sometimes choose poorly. But they also hope, dream, love, and sacrifice for ideals greater than themselves. They have shown me that true strength comes not from the ability to force compliance, but from the willingness to inspire cooperation. She turned directly toward the camera, speaking now to Vorthik specifically. I know you came here to retrieve me, but I will not return to a life of fear and control. If you wish to take me, you will have to destroy this world and everything beautiful it contains. But if you do, you will prove only that you are afraid of what humanity represents. Possibility that there is a better way to live. The transmission ended in silence that stretched across space itself. On Earth, humans waited. In space, Vorthic's fleet remained motionless. And in the vast network of the Nexus Empire, seeds of revolution began to sprout in soil that had been barren for centuries. That tomorrow would bring Vorthic's final decision and humanity's ultimate test. The final hour dawn of the seventh day arrived with an eerie calm. No birds sang in the desert around the landing site. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath as Earth waited for Vorthic's verdict. David stood beside Zara, their hands intertwined, watching the three massive ships hanging motionless in the morning sky. The warlord's shuttle descended precisely at the agreed time, touching down in the same spot where this unprecedented negotiation had begun. But something was different about Vorthik as he emerged. His movements lacked their previous mechanical precision, and the tactical displays on his mask flickered irregularly. Princess Zara, he said, his amplified voice carrying less authority than before, your transmission has created ... complications. What kind of complications? Dr. Winters asked. Vorthic's masked head turned toward the human delegation. 17 worlds within the Nexus Empire have declared independence in the past 3 days. Civilian populations are demanding governmental reforms based on what they call the human model. My own crews report decreased compliance with standard military protocols. David felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. Your people want freedom. Freedom is chaos, Vorthik replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Order requires hierarchy. Strength demands submission. Does it? Zara stepped forward, her crown's crystal pulsing with gentle light. Look at what Earth has accomplished in just 7 days. No single authority commanded their response, yet they achieved more coordination than most military campaigns. They shared resources without central control, protected each other without direct orders. The warrior's doubt, for the first time since his arrival, Vorthik removed his mask. The face revealed beneath was humanoid, but scarred by countless cybernetic modifications. His eyes, once organic, had been replaced with mechanical sensors that glowed with cold blue light. Most shocking was the expression on his features, confusion, and something that might have been pain. I have conquered 47 worlds, he sighed quietly. Each victory was achieved through overwhelming force and the destruction of resistance. I believed this was the natural order, the only way intelligent species could coexist. But you're questioning that now, David observed. Vorthik nodded slowly. My analysis systems cannot explain Earth's response patterns. Your species should have fragmented under pressure, yet you unified. You should have hoarded resources for defense, yet you shared them freely. You should have submitted to superior force, yet you maintained your principles even facing annihilation. General Harrison stepped forward. Maybe your analysis systems are missing something important. Maybe they can't measure what really matters to humans. Which is love, Zara answered simply. Connection. the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than ourselves. These aren't weaknesses to be eliminated through cybernetic enhancement. They're the source of true strength. The choice of words Vorthik was silent for long moments, his mechanical eyes processing data streams that seemed to bring him no clarity. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of centuries of conditioning, being challenged by days of impossible evidence. The Nexus Council has ordered me to retrieve Princess Zara and establish Earth as a client state under Nexus authority. Standard protocol would involve demonstration bombardments, followed by the installation of a compliant planetary government. Fear rippled through the human delegation, but no one fled. Instead, they moved closer together, forming a protective circle around Zara and David. The gesture was instinctive, powerfully human, and utterly confounding to Vorthik's tactical training. However, he continued, my observations suggest that implementing standard protocols would result in the destruction of something unprecedented. Earth represents a successful alternative to Nexus social organization. As a military strategist, I must consider the potential value of preserving this alternative for further study. What are you saying? Zara asked. Vorthik turned his attention to her, and for a moment his expression seemed almost human. I am saying that perhaps you were right to flee. Perhaps there are forms of strength I never learned to recognize. He activated a communication device on his wrist, broadcasting to his fleet in the Kalani military language. The transmission was brief, but clearly of enormous significance. When it ended, Vorthik looked back at the assembled humans. I have ordered my fleet to withdraw from Earth space. Princess Zara is hereby granted political asylum under the protection of developing species protocols. Earth will be designated a restricted zone, off limits to Nexus expansion for a minimum of 100 years. Love across the stars, the celebration that followed, was unlike anything in human history. Around the world, people who had been holding their breath for 7 days finally exhaled. Church bells rang, sirens wailed in joy rather than warning, and millions of voices raised in spontaneous songs of relief and triumph. But for David and Zara, the most important moment came quietly. After the crowds had dispersed and the politicians had returned to their capitals, they sat together on the small porch of the observation station, watching the last of Vorthik's ships disappear among the stars. You could go with them, David said softly. Vorthik's offer of asylum doesn't mean you have to stay on Earth. Zara smiled, the expression transforming her alien features into something unmistakably human in its warmth. Where else would I go? This is my home now. Not because I have nowhere else to run, but because this is where I choose to be. Even though my species is chaotic and contradictory, and often foolish, especially because of that. She took his hand, her touch warm despite the cool desert evening. Your people taught me something my own species forgot long ago. They taught me that perfection isn't the goal. Growth is, connection is, love is. David pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side, despite coming from an entirely different world. So what happens now? Now we build something new, Zara said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Earth has proven that there's another way for species to relate to each other. Vorthik's report will reach the Council and other worlds. We'll hear about what happened here. Some will dismiss it as impossible. Others will see it as hope. And us? Zara turned to face him fully, her star-bright eyes reflecting the lights of his small human world. We show them that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to change the galaxy. Above them, the Milky Way stretched in an endless canopy of possibilities. For the first time since her arrival, Zara looked at the stars not with longing for what she had lost, but with excitement for what humanity might help her build. The alien princess had looked to the stars and found her destiny, but a human heart had shown her that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when you choose to stay exactly where love has planted you. Epilogue. Seeds of Change 1 year later. Earth received its first official diplomatic contact from the Galactic Council, an organization that had been formed by the 17 worlds that declared independence following Zara's transmission. They came not as conquerors or judges, but as students, eager to learn about the human model of governance and social organization. David and Zara served as Earth's first ambassadors to the stars, their love story having become a legend that inspired countless others across the galaxy. They proved that when hearts change, worlds follow, and that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply choosing to care for someone different from yourself. The Nexus Empire still existed, still ruled through fear and control. But on the edges of their territory, on worlds that had heard whispers of a better way, people looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. And on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, humans continued to do what they did best, choosing hope over fear, love over power, and connection over conquest. The alien princess had indeed looked to the stars, but it was a human heart that changed her path, and in doing so, changed the destiny of the galaxy itself.